This is a pretty interesting item that I felt like showing. It's a bootleg Godzilla Gigan figure from sometime in the 1980s. It's very interesting, however I don't know all that much about it because as anybody who has any interest in bootlegs of literally anything, it's hard to find information about them. And this item, or this toy, is no different. Gigan is this monster from Godzilla who he kind of looks like a dinosaur fish thing, and he has these big fins on his back. And this figure has one fin on his back, whereas the actual Gigan has two. And the main difference between this bootleg figure and the official design of Gigan is that Gigan's kind of a cyborg. He has a Cylon type eye and big huge hook hand thingies and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of people seem to say that this bootleg is Gigan before he got upgraded. A lot of people on the internet like to say that this toy was made by a company called Imperial. However, they don't have any source, and I couldn't find any evidence to suggest that it was. The company Imperial mostly made dinosaur toys, but they did make a Godzilla bootleg, as in actual Godzilla himself. But they always put their name on whatever they made. This figure only has one marking on it, and it's probably going to be difficult for me to show, but it's that tiny little thing there on his foot, which says China. Regardless of this figure being made by the company Imperial or not, it's highly likely that this figure contains a lot of lead. Back in the 1980s, dinosaur figures and other similar toys made out of similar plastics, which is this sort of, I don't really know how to describe it, a hard rubbery plastic, vinyl type material. They would put lead into the plastic because they used a cheap pigment and the lead would get out the colour a lot better. So of course that means that if a child was to, let's say, bite off this horn here, it might prove toxic. This figure is very, very strange looking. It has a beak and a tongue, which is surprisingly painted for how cheap this is. Its eyes are not very even at all. He looks pretty goofy. Unfortunately, on my one, somebody did eat off his horn there, so I hope nothing bad happened to them. But they also ate off the foot, so perhaps it was a dog, and the end of the tail. This figure was very cheaply produced, and there's a lot of overflowing plastic. You can see a line down the center of his chest, and on his head there is all overflowing plastic. There used to be a lot on his fin here, but I shaved it off with a razor blade to make it look nicer. And there was also some around the place where his tail attaches, which his tail can move. It doesn't have any head articulation, but it does have arm articulation. They can't move that much. They can kind of go up and down, and that's just about it. Both arms. And its legs can move as well. One strange thing that I think about this figure is it seems to have knee pads. I don't know why it would. I've always wondered what this figure came packaged as. Did it come in a box? Did it come in a bag? Did it come in a blister pack? I can't find any pictures of it online. I also can't find a definitive source for what year it comes from. I saw a lot of people saying 1980s, and just 1980s, not specifically any year. I did see somebody say around 1985 or 1984, but they didn't exactly explain why they came to that conclusion. I also saw people selling it as from the 1970s, but I highly, highly doubt that. It's supposed to have little lumps like this on all of these fin parts, but somebody must have eaten those off as well. The paint application is rather terrible. If you see here, there's this sort of white spray paint, and clearly that was supposed to go on these fin things, which again, the actual Gigan does have. His ones are silver. On this side of the figure, there is hardly any green paint. But then on this side, it's been overpainted with green. Very strange. Something I also don't understand, and I'm pretty sure this goes for the real Gigan as well. He's supposed to have a beak, but he also has tusks. Why does something with a beak need tusks, and how does it close its mouth? It's very weird. I saw this in a second-hand shop, and I just thought it was like the coolest looking thing ever, because I love bootlegs. So I decided I would get it. And now I'm showing it because of how interesting it is to me, even though I don't know all that much about it, I should be clear. I do like the scales on it. It looks kind of aquatic to me. I don't know if the actual Gigan has just these two-toed feet. I don't know all that much about Godzilla, to be quite frankly honest, but I do like this figure because of his goofy eyes. And also just the fact that it looks cool overall. What I said about there possibly being lead in this figure, there's no way of actually knowing, or at least not me knowing, without testing it. And as far as I know, in order to test it properly, I do have to completely destroy the toy. And I don't want to do that because this thing is very interesting to me. There's two variants of this figure. There is this one, which is a sort of pinky brown colour and green paint. And there's another one which is yellow with red paint, and sometimes they can have red eyes. And from what I've seen, this version seems to sell for more than the yellow version. I'm not sure why, but I see people selling this one and people buying this one, in fact, for around 40 to 60 euro, whereas the yellow one can go from like 20 to 30 euro. Which is quite a lot of money for a cheap bootleg from the 80s, which could quite possibly be toxic. Apparently, people who collect dinosaur toys and Godzilla toys as well call this a Chinasaur because it's made in China. That's as much as I know about the figure. Well, I'll end with his goofy stare.